Order number 2, communication from the chair.
Yes, what is out of order?
Mr. Speaker, last week we communicated to your office with regards to the changes made in the leadership of the House, of the minority side. From last week, this communication has been lying in your office up to today. Can you listen? Can you give me a chance? Can you give me a chance? Can you give me a chance?
We are on order number 2, communication from the chair. So what is out of order that I stood to give communication?
Yes, that is what I want to.
So what do you expect me to do when we get to order number 2? To sit or to stand so that I can give any communication?
You have this kind of manners.
Magistrate, can you obviously, because I'm on order number 2, you shouldn't expect any communication from the chair.
Okay,
maybe,
that's fine. That's fine.
Maybe you did not.
That's fine.
You did not
maybe I did not hear you properly. Maybe I didn't hear you properly. Thank you. But Kalwale should be able to behave yourself.
Can the senators kindly have your seats? Honorable Senators, as you may recall at the sitting of the Senate held on Wednesday, 15th February 2023, the Senate Minority Leader rose on a point of order seeking the directions of the Chair regarding a proposed change in the leadership of the minority party. The Senate Minority Leader ascertained that he had communicated changes in the leadership of the minority side the previous day and was concerned that the changes had not been effected and communicated to the Senate. The Senate Minority Leader more or less demanded that the changes be communicated at that sitting, arranging that failure to do so portrayed boundary on the part of the speakership. I will request the Senator to approach your seat. There is a bit long communication. Honorable Senators, as we recall, I undertook to issue a communication on this matter. This morning at a meeting of the Senate Business Committee, I indicated to the committee that the communication was ready and was to be communicated today. However, this afternoon at 1:15 p.m., the Speaker of the Senate was served with an order from the Political Parties Disputes Tribunal in Political Parties Disputes Tribunal number PPDTC E003/2023 Fatuma Ndanduro and Jubilee Party of Kenya versus Azimio la Umoja One Kenya Coalition Party, in which the Speaker of the Senate is joined as a third interested party. The Tribunal issued, among its others, the following order. And first, and I quote, that pending inter-parties hearing and termination of the application, interim orders of injunction are hereby issued, restraining the respondent and interested parties, either by themselves, their servants, agents, and or any other persons acting on their behest from implementing the communication and resolution by the respondents' parliamentary group meeting held on 14th February 2023, purporting to remove the first applicant and other members of Jubilee Party from the position of Senate Minority Whip and parliamentary committees and its attendant privileges, respectively. The matter is scheduled for mention before the Tribunal on 20th February 2023 at 2:30 p.m. to confirm compliance and for further directions. Honorable Senators, as you are aware, Article 3(1) of the Constitution places an obligation on every person to respect, uphold, and defend the Constitution. Additionally, Article 10 of the Constitution includes as one of the national values and principles of governance the rule of law. Article 115(1), 159(1) of the Constitution further provides that judicial authority is derived from the people and vests in and shall be exercised by the courts and tribunals established by or under the Constitution. Honorable Senators, respect of the rule of law and judicial authority are fundamental tenets of our democratic system of governance, which we all, without exception, obligated to uphold. Accordingly, in the circumstances, I hereby defer the delivery of the communication on this matter pending the outcome of the proceedings that are before the political parties disputes tribunal or the vacation of the orders in political parties disputes tribunal number PPDTC/E003/2023 Fatuma Ndanduro and Jubilee Party of Kenya versus Azimio la Umoja, one party, one Kenya coalition party. I thank you. Minority Leader, Mazel Stewart.
Mr. Speaker, we asked for the communication with regards to the minority side on the leadership changes. I'm glad you have read what you have read, but first and foremost, that tribunal order has not been served upon myself. It has not been served upon my brother Lekina, and it has not been served on any side of the minority. That is point number one. Number two, Mr. Speaker, you may ignore the standing orders, but you cannot ignore precedents. And I want to lay down the precedents in a very formal way. There was Murkomen, who is now the Minister of Roads, using the same provision. He was removed, and in his place, Samuel Pogisio was to take over the leadership. And it was being done by the majority side. You can see that even Kihika Kimani, who was a whip, and Kihika Kimani was the first whip that we had. But, Mr. Speaker, Kihika Kimani, under the same provision,
Honorable Senators,
under the same provision,
the minority leader behind you,
under the same provision, Kihika Kimani was, Susan Kihika Kimani was removed from being a whip, and in her place, Kangata took over. The same provision was used to remove Kangata and we put Wamatangi, and that was being done by the majority side. None of us commented on this side because that was a party issue. Mr. Speaker, we find it strange that the same House, together with all these precedents that were used, have not been used now. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I have not seen the order myself, but I can tell you one thing. I want to address you on this issue. That the dispute here is between Senator Fatuma Dulo and her party. It is not between Fatuma Dulo and the House. That is point number one. And I want you to hear me properly. Mr. Speaker, while I agree that the PPDP is the right avenue to go, but the PPDP has absolutely no power to serve and stop the proceedings or to stop the procedures of Parliament. That jurisdiction to serve Parliament, I have not seen it. This is the first time that we are accepting this kind of an order in this House. What we want as the minority is that the communication that we gave you last week, which you've stayed with that communication for much too long. I've never seen communications coming to the House and staying that long. But this particular one has stayed for so long. You are now denying the minority an opportunity to have their leaders. Finally, looking at that order itself, it has all the parties as she wanted to have them, but it has not included the deputy whip. So if you are to say that that order is correct, then the position of the deputy whip is not mentioned anywhere in that order. Go ahead and communicate. That order of the deputy minority whip is not covered. Mr. Speaker, we know there are three arms of government: the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. These are arms of the government. And there's what you call separation of powers. Mr. Speaker, they speak about the executive, the judiciary, and the legislature. PPDP doesn't fall anywhere close to the government. It's a tribunal, and it cannot issue an order against Parliament. Mr. Speaker, your hands are tied. As it stands right now, Mr. Speaker, your hands are tied. We go by precedence in the Senate and in Parliament. Your brother, former, who is now the Attorney General, Muturi, clearly stated when he was served with an order, and that order was coming from the judiciary, not a tribunal. And he said he will not implement that one, even though it was coming from the judiciary. And he said Parliament have what you call, the government has what you call separation of powers. That is one of the, and finally, that is one of the issues. And finally, Mr. Speaker, you have not made your communication. You have gone ahead to communicate something else. You have gone ahead to pronounce yourself on the court order and not the communication that came to you before. Our communication came to you before. And there's this point of a delaying, I don't know what I can call it, but you have delayed that communication. You have allowed now to read to the House something that has come from PDP. So which communication should you have communicated first? Should you have communicated the communication that came from the minority side, or should you go ahead and now communicate on something that does not even affect you as a senator, as the Speaker of the Senate? That is one of the issues I want, and I want you now to address the issue of the Deputy Whip, Edwin Sifuna, who is not party to this, all this. Confirm him as my deputy so that this side does not stay without leadership. Thank you.
I'm following a list here, kindly. You have already placed your account, so just have your cool wait. I give you that opportunity. Majority Leader, Senator Chirio Talun.
Mr. Speaker, we have gone full circle. This is a very interesting debate. And if I was to be honest, and I want to be as candid as I can be, I'm a bit confused on this topic. I have defended both sides of this debate. I have been on the side of Parliament cannot be injuncted. And I used to shout so loudly, seated where Senator Kinyua is, for many years. Because that's a vogue word. That's the thing that I heard when I first came to this house. Being said, I think it must have been one of the impeachments. I think Deputy Governor Kiala or something. And we said Parliament cannot be injuncted. So we enjoyed for many times, every time there were court orders that were brought before the speakers, and we took a very firm position. Until one bright, sunny morning, when President Uhuru decided to remove our colleagues, Senator Susan Kihika and Senator Onesmus Kipchumba Murkomen. We rushed to court, secured the orders, brought them before the Speaker. Then we were quickly reminded, Parliament cannot be injuncted. So here we are, a practice that we had established so strongly, that we used to be defenders of, despite having a valid court order presented to Speaker Lusaka. In minutes, he received a phone call. I've never seen my good friend, the Speaker, shake as he did on that morning. Quickly dashed to the House and communicated the changes. That gave me a different view to this conversation about the House cannot. Why don't you keep your calm, my good friend, so that we don't
Senators, I will request you to restrain close purposes.
In fact, I intend to be very brief, Mr. Speaker.
And I'm happy actually today. I want us to debate like honorable senators. Hammer your points properly and sit down.
Thank
Another
you, sir.
senator will
That's
come
what I
there
intend to do.
and take over.
I'm sure he will have his opportunity to say his what he thinks about this particular topic. If you can restrain Senator Sifuna, Mr. Speaker, because you know he stands straight next to me.
Majority Leader, proceed and conclude.
Anyway, Mr. Speaker, so today we are here. There's a court order, but there's something different because I've taken time to look at the court order. Unlike in all the previous court orders that were being addressed to the Senate, this one specifically mentions you as a speaker. And that leaves me in a very interesting place. It's not in my place to advise you. It is you to make your decision because you're the speaker. But I'm not sure whether you want to proceed and defy a court order that is directly mentioning you as a speaker and not the institution of the Senate as has been previously. Because the order that you were carrying then was to the Senate, but not directly to the speaker. And that's the leeway. That's the leeway that Speaker then used and said, in any case, it's not me as in person that have been mentioned. Finally, Mr. Speaker, because I know my colleagues want us to debate this matter and are saying, please don't involve yourselves. But I agree with the leader of minority that there is precedence. Hardly 2 months ago, Mr. Speaker, National Assembly was vetting permanent secretaries, or they call principal secretaries nowadays. LSK moved to court on certain issues that they found to be wanting. What did your good brother in the National Assembly do? He lived up to the spirit of the Constitution as was his interpretation and waited. I think the National Assembly was injected for about a whole 1 month. In fact, the government stayed for close to 2 months without principal secretaries because of a court order. The process was still ongoing. But the Speaker said, because 1, I am a law-respecting Kenyan. 2, I swore by the Constitution. 3, as somebody who campaigned and actively promised Kenyans, because there is a history to this. We've come from a part of a history in our country during very difficult times when court orders were being ignored. And it was one of our campaign promise, at least for those of us on this side, that we shall always respect court orders. So, Mr. Speaker, you're being invited to make or to tread on very dangerous ground, which is defy a court order that's directly addressed to you. I leave it to your wisdom, Mr. Speaker. But at least on this particular matter, I want to urge you to take precedence from what your senior brother, the Speaker of the National Assembly, did when he was presented with a court order against the vetting of principal secretaries. He waited until that decision was vacated by the courts and the exercise was concluded. In any case, I have seen, Mr. Speaker, that that order is only for, I think, 3 or 4 days only. How long is that? Before many of the points that my good friend, the leader of minority, is arguing here, some of them can be made before that court because they have that opportunity to go and tell the court all those very nice things that he's saying. Because indeed, he is right and I agree with him. You are not a party to this dispute. This is a divorce proceeding in the Azimio coalition. You are neither one of the dowry negotiators who featured during the time that they were getting together, neither should you feature in their divorce. But unfortunately, your hands are tied, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, make your decision, but be wise on how you go about it, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Mogeni, Eric Okongo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. First, Mr. Speaker, I was trying to raise on a point of order.
Because, the Honorable Senator, also the majority leader, was on a point of order. All these are prosecuting point of orders.
Yeah, because, Mr. Speaker, the point I wanted to raise is that as a House, we are making reference to a court order, which on this side we have not had sight of. But it seems the majority side have a court order. They even know how it's worded. But I wanted to request, Mr. Speaker, that you know so that there is a fairness in the debate of this matter. If the court order was applied to the majority side, fairness demands, Mr. Speaker, that we should also we have been given a copy. Senator Kalwale, the issue I'm raising, it touches on both sides. We need to see a court order because, let me tell you, you know, we have all lived in this country. There are some grounds which are so dangerous to take this country to. For example, Speaker, you know, you may be thinking that that ruling you are reading today is toward the minority side. But me, I'm looking at the big picture. We have sat here, Mr. Speaker, as senators, performing a critical duty of impeaching governors. And we have been served with court orders, Senator Kalwale, before. And speakers who have sat on your seat have ruled consistently, Mr. Speaker, that if we open it up, and you record this day, if you open it up to Kenyans to start serving your office with court order, which you receive and you come and make communication, Mr. Speaker, that is the day we will start killing this house. That is the day we will start killing this house. Mr. Speaker, your office does not serve the interest of just one day. Your office should serve posterity. Posterity. Mr. Speaker, if you read our standing orders, and I'm saying this with a very heavy heart, because we are elected leaders from 47 counties with special interest senators here, Mr. Speaker. The moment we say a very Changing leadership is a very small matter. Huh? As I speak here, Mr. Speaker, I came here to debate a serious issue that transpired yesterday before SIPAC, where Kenya Revenue Authority is levying distress on my county of Nyamira for non-payment of pay for salaries for the month of December, January. Yet my county has never received disbursements. And here we are talking about useless court orders from a tribunal. Are we serious as senators, Mr. Speaker? Some of these things, Mr. Speaker, things have happened. We have sat here, Mr. Speaker. One time, Mr. Speaker, this side removed Senator Wetangula. It took a day. It took a day, Mr. Speaker. And there was no so much ulabalu. If you go to the answer, when the Speaker, the governor for Wajir, was being impeached, we were served with a court order, not from a tribunal, from the High Court of the Republic of Kenya. And because we respect the sovereignty of this house, we rejected that order. Where do you want to take us to now? If we start setting precedent that we will be receiving orders from a tribunal, and you communicate from your chair, Mr. Speaker, I tell you, not even a county assembly can do what we are doing. Let us be serious, Mr. Speaker. If you look at the freedom of parliament, if you go down history lane, you know it, senators. There are days you could never stop Honorable Shikuku in single party era from speaking on the floor because of the respect of the House, Mr. Speaker. I have not seen this court order, but I'm a very sad Kenyan, extremely saddened, Mr. Speaker, that we can be injected, the Senate of the Republic of Kenya can be injected by a tribunal, and we receive an order, and you make a communication. Mr. Speaker, what are we doing to this country? What are we doing? Mr. Speaker, if you read Standing Order 103, and I'm happy that I'm in this house with my colleague, Senior Counsel, Professor Ugenda. If you read Standing Order number 103, even when there are proceedings that can be deemed to be sub judice before this, there is a way you bring those proceedings before the House. Now you are talking about proceedings which have not been tabled before this House, and we are debating a matter we don't know. Me, I've never known, I've not seen these proceedings. I don't know who has filed them, against who, but here we are debating. Mr. Speaker, you should have procedurally asked the person who is affected by those orders, in line with Standing Order number 103, to bring that, the proceedings, the pleadings, table them before the House, Mr. Speaker, and then we debate to determine whether what we are about to debate is sub judice, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say I respect courts, Mr. Speaker. I've been a lawyer for Senator Cheragei here when he was being shunned by everybody from the majority side. I was the only one representing him in court at 4 o'clock. I went defending his senator here, Lelegwe. I'm a respected man in his county, Mr. Speaker. So when I'm standing here, Mr. Speaker, I'm standing here in defense of this House and in defense of rule of law. And I will say the same even if it was happening on the other side, because I know the critical role that this House plays. If tomorrow the governor for Nyamira is summoned and he comes and serves us with an injunction, then what will be my work as Senator for Nyamira? Mr. Speaker, I plead with you, Mr. Speaker, to reconsider what you are about to do. Please, for the sake of this country and for the sake of this House. And Senator Cheruiyot, please, I'm pleading with you. Don't look at these small fights here. Look at this House. Look at the interest of this House, please. Let us not kill this House. Please. Please. And I've said we have precedents. Senator Kangata was a majority whip. You said you passed resolutions. The Speaker, who was not even a lawyer, I'm happy the Speaker, the substantive Speaker is a lawyer. Members of Law Society of Kenya are looking at him. I was once serving as chair of Law Society of Kenya when the late Chief Justice of this Republic, Gisheru, saw the late President Kibaki at night. And we told him, these things will come back to haunt you. When Kenyans enacted the new constitution 2010, read it. A proviso was put in that constitution barring that Chief Justice not to serve under the new constitution. So you must protect your office. You must protect the reputation of the office of the Speaker for posterity. So, Mr. Speaker, please, if there is any court order, if there are any pleadings, bring them to the House, table them here, we debate and make a decision. We are a senior house, the upper house.
Thank you. Senator Mboni Karwale.
Mr. Speaker, my system never works, but my seat never moves. Thank you for this chance. And Mr. Speaker, I rise to agree with the leader of the minority. I rise to agree with the remarks by Senator Omugeni. And I am reflecting on the remarks by the leader of the majority. Honorable Senators, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be extremely careful. The doctrine of separation of powers in India has been followed by the Separations of Powers Act of India. And because this area is not very clear, we've left the country to where we are now. You were not elected to come here and be wasting taxpayers' money discussing little things as to who sits on which committee, for representing which side of the house. We were elected to come here to do oversight, Mr. Speaker, discuss the budget, Mr. Speaker, represent our people. I want to appeal to the Chief Administrator of Justice in this country, Justice Martha Koome, to make sure that this kind of things are discharged expeditiously. You are not to blame. You have court orders against you. And what kind of speaker would you be, Mr. Speaker, to be the one who is known to be defying courts? You can't. So if the court, and Omugeni, you know, a tribunal, when they speak, they have the power of a court. If he defies the tribunal, he has no respect for the lower court, for the high court, court of appeal, even the Supreme Court. So let us be angry, but allow the speaker to do what he's doing. He's been served. That's it. You observe the rule of law, and if, honorable leader of the minority, your attention, if you must quote precedents in this house, do us a favor. You have quoted the president of Murkomen, Senator Susan Kihiga, and Kangata. If you must quote, don't quote presidents that were occasioned to this country by the infamous government of the handshake. The president you can quote in this house, leader of the minority, is the president that took place in the lower house, where the same courts, the way they have done, they stopped the voting or the vetting of principal secretaries. And the president stopped, the speaker stopped, a ruling was made, and the matter was unlocked. So we want to invite our speaker to use the president by Senator Wetangula, who is the current speaker of the National Assembly, allow this matter to go the due process, and then come to us and rule and lead us. We are with you. You are with us. You are for us. We are for you, for the country. Don't come here and play games. Let this thing end quickly through the due process being respected, instead of coming here, taking us around, walking out of the house and coming to Kakamega and singing to women over the weekend. Mr. Speaker, let us finish it here. You, Mr. Speaker, don't be intimidated by me. Don't be intimidated by the leader of the minority. Walk the narrow path, rule of law. There is a court order against you ruling this thing. Wait, when it is discharged, do your work. Mr. Speaker, I urge you not to listen to the standing order from the leader of the minority.
Senator Sifuna Edwin. If honorable senators, if you have placed your hand in intervention, actually even I'm picking even from the requests, kindly hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, last week I was getting hot and bothered about this matter. But now that I know exactly what's going on, I'm just laughing, Mr. Speaker. I've discovered that they are just basic political games. I would use the word cheap, but people will jump out of their seats. Mr. Speaker, last week somebody told me that, you know, when I was elected, I came to this house thinking I'm coming to legislate, to oversight, and to do what? And to represent my people of Nairobi, Mr. Speaker. Somebody added another thing here last week, that I have also come here as a student to learn. So I will also take this opportunity to teach what it is that I know, and that is the law, Mr. Speaker. First, I am very happy.
Honorable Senator Nairobi, you remember I reminded you in the morning that you are a senator for my kids. So teach them also how to represent.
Yes, I am hoping, Mr. Speaker, that your children are watching. Because I will be saying a few things, and I hope that I can inspire them to be future senators of Nairobi. Mr. Speaker, first of all, I'm very happy that we have come to this juncture. I was imploring you last week that you need to get this matter out of your office so that we can pursue the dispute between us and one of our members in the proper forum. I want to agree with Senator Dulo and the action that she has taken, that in fact the proper forum for resolution of disputes between political parties and their members, or political parties and political parties within a coalition, is a political parties disputes tribunal. We have been vindicated as a minority because we were telling the House last week that in fact the Speaker has no role whatsoever in the dispute amongst the minority party. That in fact what the standing orders require you to do, Mr. Speaker, is upon receipt of this decision that has been made by the minority party, all you need to do is to make a communication to the House so that everybody else is aware. Number two, Mr. Speaker, there is something called jurisdiction. Jurisdiction is everything, as I say in law. Every single court and tribunal in this republic has to derive jurisdiction from a specific provision, either of the Constitution or of an act of Parliament. If the law does not give you jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker, you cannot assume that jurisdiction by yourself. Jurisdiction of the Political Parties Dispute Tribunal under Section 40 of the Political Parties Act is limited to the matters that I have alluded to, disputes among the members of a party and the party, or political party against political party. That jurisdiction, Mr. Speaker, does not extend to a jurisdiction over disputes over this House. The Political Parties Dispute Tribunal has no jurisdiction over the Senate, Mr. Speaker. And if you want to know that the people who went to court in this particular matter, who went to the tribunal, are aware of that fact, the Speaker of the House is actually not a respondent in that matter. They are named as an interested party, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, Mr. Speaker, I, because of my nature as a fortuitous person, have obtained a copy of that court order. And a plain reading of the order has limited the matters before that tribunal to the question of the seat of the whip of the minority side. The question of the seat of the deputy whip is not a matter before the tribunal, and it is not covered by that court order that you read to us, or that you refer to, Mr. Speaker. The question then would be whether we can debate the legality of the order, whether the tribunal can injunct Parliament. The court order has expressed itself to a specific matter, what difficulty did your office have in communicating matters not affected by that court order? So that we in the minority, and knowing how our court system works and how long justice takes in this country, are being told that until these matters are resolved at whatever stage, because it will come from the PPDT, we know she will go to the High Court as is her right. She can even go to the Court of Appeal, and these matters take time. What we are being told is, as the minority side, we will stay without a whip until that matter is resolved. It cannot be true, Mr. Speaker. So in my submissions, Mr. Speaker, I will be asking that you separate matters that are covered by these proceedings and the court order that is before you or served upon you, and if there are matters that are not covered by that dispute, you make the pronouncement on the leadership in the deputy minority whip seat. Mr. Speaker, lastly, I have been told, or we've heard you being told that, in fact, you should be very afraid that if you were to defy a court order, that you would come to you, or consequences, some undisclosed consequences will befall you. Mr. Speaker, as a lawyer who wasted no time in class, I did not sleep. I can assure you that the office is distinct from you. The office of the Speaker is an office with perpetuity. It does not say on this order that the Senator of Meru, Karuthi Murugi, if you disobey this court order, you're going to jail. There's nothing like that. And I can assure you, because we have a battery of lawyers here, if there is any consequence that will come by virtue of you standing up for the dignity of this house, free legal services will ensue from the minority side, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point further that in fact this house, every single time we argue with our colleagues from the National Assembly on who's the upper house, who's the lower house, but every single opportunity we ourselves get as senators, we impeach our own argument by making ourselves subservient to the National Assembly. If precedent is set in this house, in the Senate, Mr. Speaker, why are we being referred to precedent in the National Assembly? The Senate is not a student of the National Assembly. We don't need to learn anything from them. We are okay as a house. We are equipped with all the knowledge that we need. Our president is the president of the Senate. We don't need to be referred to any other house. Mr. Speaker, I want to join my colleagues here who are insisting that, in fact, we should be discussing serious issues. Mr. Speaker, every day I open my newspaper, my heart breaks. Yesterday or the other day, we were being told we have 4,000 doctors in this country who are unemployed. Mr. Speaker, just the other day, we were being told that even these doctors who this government has been unable to find work for are being imprisoned here by the Ministry of Health, saying that they cannot go to seek opportunities outside the country. What sort of relationship are we with with our nation? That in fact the country refuses to provide opportunity for you, then refuses you opportunity to look for jobs elsewhere. Those are the matters that I was elected to discuss here. I want to conclude, Mr. Speaker, by saying we in the minority side have no problem prosecuting this matter before the PPDT. It is something over which we have experts. Senator Osotsi basically wrote the book on how to deal with political parties at the PPDT. We are very well equipped on our side. We have no issues whatsoever. In fact, we have been taken, it's like now trying to drown a fish. You have now put us in water, because in the PPDT, that is where we thrive, Mr. Speaker. You cannot drown a fish in a pond. That is where we live. I am happy that the matter is before the PPDT. But before we conclude that case, Mr. Speaker, please do not allow this House, which in our own constitution has the powers of a high court. We are, in terms of the judiciary, you are at the same level as a high court. How can a magistrate's court issue an order directing the high court on what to do? Mr. Speaker, these are the questions to ponder. For that reason, I want to say, Mr. Speaker, please, let us not destroy this House. Give this House the dignity that has been given by those who came before us. Ensure that we are respected by all organs of government, and please do what the right thing is. It doesn't matter how long it takes. You cannot impose leadership on the minority side. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Senator William Cheptumo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am happy. Our debate today is very sober. And I think this is really good, Mr. Speaker, because we are being watched by our Kenyan people. Mr. Speaker, I listened to your communication very carefully. And it gave me the impression that you are ready today to issue a communication on the issue before the House. But you were stopped by the court order. Mr. Speaker, listening to the submissions by colleagues here, I would like to refer this House to Article 2 of the Constitution. This Constitution is a supreme law of the Republic and binds all persons and all state organs at both levels of government. Mr. Speaker, Parliament, in my submissions, is a state organ, one of the state organs, and therefore it is bound by this Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to refer members again to Article 159 of the Constitution on judicial authority. The judicial authority is derived from the people invested and shall be exercised by the courts. An emphasis, Mr. Speaker, the courts and tribunals established by or under the Constitution. Sub-Article 2 of the same article says, in exercising judicial authority, the courts and the tribunal shall be guided by the following principles. Justice shall be done to all irrespective of status. Mr. Speaker, sir, I wish to submit that the framers of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, and by that time I was serving as the Deputy Minister of Justice by this 2010. It was to give authority, Mr. Speaker, to the High Court and give similar powers also to the tribunals, Mr. Speaker. Political parties tribunal, therefore, Mr. Speaker, is an organ that has the power to issue orders, which under Article 2 of the Constitution should bind this House. Those are my humble submissions, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the members from the other side are saying that this ought not to have happened. But, Mr. Speaker, the decision they have made as a coalition is affecting political rights of a member of this House. And that is why that member has gone to court, Mr. Speaker, to secure that right, and especially if that right is infringed in a manner that if she feels is unconstitutional. So, Mr. Speaker, I think there is the balance between what we want to achieve as political parties and also political rights of an individual, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to submit that you are within the constitutional principle. Mr. Speaker, members have spoken about what happened in the lower house when the PSS, Mr. Speaker, could not be vetted. I want to add another situation again which arose, Mr. Speaker. Until last week, the Chief Administrative Secretary, Mr. Speaker, that process was also stopped. There is another second chance I can talk about this. And Mr. Speaker, that was of course against executive. So Mr. Speaker, I think this constitution cannot be applied selectively. It should be applied fairly, constitutionally, if it's protecting the interests of a member. And so, Mr. Speaker, I want to agree, and I was listening to Senior Counsel Mogeni when he was making his submissions. And he was able to plead with you that don't demean the status of the House. I think, Mr. Speaker, there is nothing more and worse than for the Speaker of this House to disobey court orders from an institution that has the power to issue a court order that can stop us. Mr. Speaker, I think it is important that we allow this process to proceed so that, Mr. Speaker, once they go back to the tribunal, do their matters, as Kalwale said, we have only about 2 or 3 days, Mr. Speaker, and we'll be back. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to be in this House and to be part and parcel of a House that is obeying court orders, fulfilling the spirit of Article 2 of our Constitution. Mr. Speaker, nobody from the other side or this side should never and ever make you feel that you did the wrong thing today in issuing the communication that you are actually prepared to do. And Mr. Speaker, in any event, Standing Order 23, which we have been arguing about it the other day, does not give a specific time frame within which we are supposed to communicate the decision after receiving a letter from the other side. So again, from the Standing Order's position, you are within the law. Again, from the perspective of the Constitution, Mr. Speaker, you are within the law. Mr. Speaker, I submit that your communication should be respected by all of us and by this House.
Thank you. Senator Olekina Ledamo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want us to be very sober today and try to prosecute this matter in a process that will be able to set a precedent and also being futuristic. Mr. Speaker, I want to pick it up from where my colleague, the senator from Baringo, has left. And I want to borrow from what is commonly referred to as the doctrine of pleasure. The doctrine of pleasure is derived from the English common law, where it states that civil servants serve under the pleasure of the crown. Mr. Speaker, if you look at the definition of a whip enforces the party's policies. A whip is not there under their own volition for them to be able to determine how party policy should be adhered to. Mr. Speaker, when a whip does not rally fellow legislators to be able to vote on matters according to the party policy, that whip may lose that whip. In fact, in other jurisdictions, they are even expelled from political parties. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this is what informed the drafters of our standing orders. When they drafted Standing Order number 23, Mr. Speaker, and I want to tell you, Mr. Speaker, that your hands are completely tied because a speaker is not a prefect of political parties. Mr. Speaker, the Standing Order is very clear. It's written in simple English. It says, upon a decision being made by the majority party or coalition under the Standing Order, the decision of the party or coalition shall be communicated to the Speaker in writing, together with the minutes of the meetings at which the decision was made. Hypothetically, Mr. Speaker, if this Senate is to welcome or entertain injunctions by a tribunal, which tribunal does not set the agenda or the policy of a political party, what exactly are we saying? Are we saying that tribunals are going to define what the Azimio la Umoja One Kenya coalition policy and procedures and constitution shall be, then what form of government or country are we going to be living in? Mr. Speaker, I want to refer back to the doctrine of pleasure. As a whip, I serve under the pleasure of my party. This cannot be applied with the same logic as to the doctrine of pleasure when it comes to now civil servants in this country post the 2010 coalition. In fact, Mr. Speaker, what I want to say is that any moment leadership is changed, just so that you know you serve under the pleasure of your political party. When the leadership is changed, you lose everything. You lose your staff go home, you lose all the privileges because you've gone against your party policies. Mr. Speaker, loyalty to parties is not something which I should be lecturing this House on, because this House already has precedents. Anytime a member disobeys the party, they are removed. I think, Mr. Speaker, what we should be doing is we should be debating on very important issues. Today, Kenyans were rioting, were demonstrating outside because of how difficult it is now to live in this country. Eric Omondi was tear-gassed outside here. Kenyans are demonstrating everywhere, saying it is becoming unbearable to live in this country. We are paid by taxpayers. I don't want to wade into the debate of who is a shareholder of this country and who is not. But the truth of the matter is, there are very important things that are now being set in abeyance until we can be able to resolve this matter of leadership. So, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to beseech you not to allow party politics to determine the agenda of this House. Because I can assure you that until the party is respected, and when I say, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, I speak with authority, I speak out of experience, because this thing has happened to me. Senator Ledamo Alekina standing here. Mr. Speaker, in the last parliament, I was elected by my colleagues as the chair of PAC. But my party decided that I was not the right person to serve as chair of PAC. That is when I started researching on the doctrine of pleasure. I went to court, I got orders, but Parliament made it difficult even for me because Parliament did not want to come in anywhere. And when I say Parliament, I mean the Secretariat in Parliament. I was trying to convene meetings. I could not be able to convene a meeting because my party said I was not going to serve as the chair of that committee. Mr. Speaker, when I saw that is happening, I said, hey, can you take the dictionary and define loyalty? When I did, I went back and I pleaded with my party leader to forgive me for having crossed the line. So, Mr. Speaker, when I stand here and I speak with authority on that subject. Please, you should not be invited to prefects political parties. Mr. Speaker, when we go to our PG, the things that we discuss in that PG do not touch on anything to do with the Senate. Laws. The first thing, which is always precedent, is how are we together as brothers? Do we still believe? Do we still subscribe to the same school of thoughts? So, Mr. Speaker, to end, I want to remind you that a whip is an enforcer of a political party, policies and procedures. A whip loses the whip when they disobey or they act against the political party that that person is serving under the pleasure of that political party. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I've heard my good brother, Senator Cheptumo, alluding to natural justice, talking about, I think I dropped it down here, talking about the right of that politician. Mr. Speaker, I want to submit to my brother that, through the chair, that when it comes to political parties, you have no right. The right is defined by your constitution, which you signed. It is not even the Kenyan constitution. It is the constitution of that political party. Loyalty to the party. And I can tell you, you will learn. If you don't know that, loyalty to the party is the #1 principle when it comes to the doctrine of pleasure. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to beseech you, so that we can now discuss matters which are important to this nation. Please follow the standing orders. Standing order number 23, your hands are completely tied. And I'm sure the Secretariat can advise as much. Your hands are tied, issue the communication, leave matters of political parties to be dealt by politicians outside this House. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Honorable Senators, I want to give another round of few, maybe 2 from each side, and this time observe 3 minutes. We're almost to the second hour. So I want to, now we give Senator Chalgei Samson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have been listening keenly. As a House, it looks like we are going to full circle, because some of us in the previous session, we were subjected to similar issues. But I want to maybe make a few points, Mr. Speaker. One is that the wording of Article 3 of the Constitution says defense of the Constitution. You have an obligation as the House of the Speaker and as a person to defend the Constitution. And every matter that comes to the House, Mr. Speaker, is considered case by case. In as much as when you look at understanding order number 1 on looking at the precedents and traditions of Parliament, Mr. Speaker, you must considering that Article 10 on principles of good governance and national values, the rule of law, forms a biggest basis of the value, Mr. Speaker. The minority side today is trying to lecture us about disobeying the rule of law that has been accusing the majority side and the government of disobeying the law. Mr. Speaker, I remember when our brothers were de-whipped and removed. Me personally, Mr. Speaker, I was removed in a press conference. So mine was worse, but others, at least the communications came to the floor of the House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the Speaker then, Lusaka, just issued, and I'm surprised that my senior and my brother, Senator Stewart Madzayo, there was no ruling that came from that chair. The Speaker, Lusaka, just noted the changes. He didn't even give a ruling. I remember the former Senator of Elgeyo Marakwet and the current CS even requested for the ruling up to the last time we were leaving the House before going to general elections, Mr. Speaker. This habit of disobeying court orders was a symptom and behavior of the handshake government, where the minority side was thriving because they didn't obey any court order, and this government or any other arm of government, Mr. Speaker, should not disobey a court order, Mr. Speaker, in as much as we appreciate the distinction of separation of powers, Mr. Speaker. When you look under the Article 159, Article 169, the tribunal, and I have tremendous respect for my learned seniors, Senator Sifuna, Senator Okongo Mugeni, but intellectual dishonesty should not take us to make comments that are convenient to do so because of political expedience, Mr. Speaker. When you look under Section 40 and 41, when this thing goes to PPDP, and Senator Sifuna say that is their field where they thrive, the 3 months are provided on how these disputes can be done. But, Mr. Speaker, we are not saying you should perfect political parties or manage affairs of political parties, but you have an obligation to protect the law. If this divorce of Azimio and Kenya lands is going to be messy with a lot of casualties, whichever direction they want to take, Mr. Speaker, we are not saying you should be part of it, but we are saying protect the law and follow the law for the benefit of all of us, Mr. Speaker. And therefore I agree with you and support your decision that let the minority side be patient. Patient does not hurt anybody, Mr. Speaker. And when those changes will come, you will communicate as per the law, so that we are not running this house, Mr. Speaker, the way all of us want to do, Mr. Speaker. And as a speaker, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Senator Chege. Senator Kajwang Moses. You have 3 minutes carefully.
Mr. Speaker, this is not a legal matter. This is a political matter clothed as a legal matter. And we are behaving not unlike many county assemblies, which in the last 10 years has built a strong precedent in removal of speakers, deputy speakers, and leaders of the houses. Mr. Speaker, I've seen this. Mutembei County Assembly, in the last term, changed speakers 4 times, leaders of majority and minority almost 5 times. And every time, they hid under legal terms like that which was born in your communication, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Standing Order number 23, if you read it carefully, and I've read it up to the end, we are engaged in what Shakespeare would call too much ado about nothing. Mr. Speaker, once you have received communication of the changes from the minority, the standing orders do not require you to do anything. All you are required to do is to receive. And I've read that Standing Order number 23, and I heard the chair legal saying that there's an element of communication. It is not there. There's no communication. Communication could probably be for pecuniary reasons, Mr. Speaker. We acknowledge that the current whip has staff. The current whip has got certain benefits. The current whip has got accommodation and office, and there has to be order in the manner in which that transition happens. And Mr. Speaker, on the minority side, I believe that that order and respect must be observed, because the people working for the current whip can easily work for the next whip. The office or the benefits the current whip is enjoying must be dealt with in a manner that does not leave her feeling like she's being crucified by this house. Mr. Speaker, we have a de facto whip on this side and a de jure whip on this side. You can be legal but illegitimate. And Mr. Speaker, that's why in our weekend rallies, and the leader of majority got us wrong. We are saying, yes, William Ruto is the legitimate president, but he is illegitimate in our eyes. The matter of legitimacy was dealt with at the Supreme Court. The matter of illegitimacy is upon us. Mr. Speaker, you can have a legal child, but that child is legitimate. So, even on our side, there is nothing that stops Senator Ledamo Lekina from assuming the duties of the whip. All we need from Mr. Speaker is your communication or the communication of the clerk to ensure that there's a proper and orderly handing over. And I want to urge the new office bearers that those staff you're going to find in those offices, treat them well. Finally, Mr. Speaker, we are watering down this Senate. This is our second session. We have not processed any single private member's bill. My bill is on the order paper. Release us so that we can start discussing issues. And Mr. Speaker, if you observed, the president went for the induction of the National Assembly. He sent Gachagua to the induction of the Senate. That tells you where the government of today puts the Senate in the pecking order. The president took time to be with governors in Naivasha, and he sends Rigiji to be with senators. That is a position that we are putting ourselves in, and very soon we shall be considered along county assemblies if we continue squabbling instead of...
Okay, Senator Mgatano Danson.
I want to thank you, Mr. Speaker, for giving me the opportunity to share my thoughts on this matter. Mr. Speaker, I am very, very worried that we as a Senate seem to be plowing back our powers, surrendering them to the judiciary, Mr. Speaker. We have fought a long way, and history can bear us, as parliaments, even in the history of the development of parliament, Mr. Speaker. The king in France used to say, "L'État c'est moi," I am the state. He used to be the personification of both parliament, of both the judiciary and the executive. When the philosophers came and provided for separation of power, Mr. Speaker, the parliamentarians continue to struggle to get their space. So, Mr. Speaker, I want us as a House to stand very firmly and protect our space, not just as a Senate, but even on behalf of the other side. Mr. Speaker, I am reading section 117 of the Constitution that gives us an expanded power of debate within this House, Mr. Speaker. This House has unfettered power to provide its proceedings with complete freedom, total freedom, Mr. Speaker, of interference from judiciary and from the executive. Mr. Speaker, we must fight for that space. Mr. Speaker, I'm also inviting you to look at section 12 of the National Assembly Privileges and Powers Immunities Act. That act interprets section 117 by further providing that no proceedings from the courts can stop what is happening in this House, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am urging you, we must fight for our space. If we surrender this space to the courts will take it, because that's how our power is. If we surrender it to the executive will take it, because that's how power is. Power does not provide for vacuum. Let us take our power. Let us not accept injunctions. Mr. Speaker, I am wondering what will happen to us if all court orders came here and stopped debate. We will not be doing anything, Mr. Speaker. Let us make our stand clear. Let us pronounce ourselves and say the Senate will not be hindered by the judiciary.
Senator Beatrice Akinyi.
Mr. Speaker, I rise on my foot to add my voice to the discourse that has been going on here over the last 4 sittings. And to start with the court order that the majority side are asking you to respect, a court order which to me you have been waiting for. Mr. Speaker, reference has been made to a political right of a member, that right must be...
I beg your pardon, Senator Beatrice. Did you say, what did you say?
I said I add my voice to a discourse that has been before this House over the last 4 sittings, a discourse that was initiated by the minority, but largely now of interest to the majority. Honorable Speaker, as we talk about, Honorable Speaker, as we discuss this issue, I want to remind this House of very serious issues that Kenyans have interest on that we should be discussing. Honorable Speaker, there is the hot issue of the plight of ECD teachers in this country. This House should be taking this all afternoon and all this time we've been using to discuss the political issue on how to solve the challenge of the ECD teachers that have a struggle with our governors and the Salaries and the Remuneration Commission. Honorable Speaker, Kenyans are struggling with a number of issues. Counties have not gotten their money. Some of the counties, I was in some conversation where some counties got their disbursement. The last of it was in October. That to me should be a very important issue that should be discussed by this Senate. If I don't mention the issue of drought, we see forest burning. Of concern is grade 6 in secondary school, while grade 8 is in primary, and there are no teachers teaching grade 6 in the secondary schools. What I'm saying, Honorable Speaker, is that as we struggle with the issues of political parties, and as we struggle trying to get a member to have their political right the way they want, I want to remind you, Honorable Speaker, that that same member is recorded here having said that the minority side should take their leadership. So, Honorable Speaker, what...
Thank you. Time is over. Thank you, Senator Nerito John Kinyua.
Asante Bwana Spika. Nataka kuanza kukumwambia kiongozi walio wachache ya kwamba muhini na mhiniwa njia yao ni moja. Bwana Spika, nimeketi kusikiza na kile ambacho tunavutia pande zote mbili wa watu wanapoongea, Bwana Spika, ni amri ya mahakama. Bwana Spika, koti ikitoa amri yake, mimi kwangu naona ni vizuri tufuate. Kwa sababu tusipokuwa watu wa kufuata amri ya koti, Bwana Spika, na imetolewa vizuri, na wewe ulichofanya kizuri Bwana Spika, haukusema chochote, umesema amri ya koti. Nimemsikiza seneta hapa Nairobi akisema ya kwamba, na akataja hata seneta wa kutoka Vihiga kusema wao ni watu waliobombea katika ile mambo ya kufuatilia mambo ya mahakama. Bwana Spika, ni lipi linalowasumbua? Kwa sababu kulingana na ule ujumbe ambao umesoma kutoka mahakamani, umesema ya kwamba tarehe 28 watu watakwenda pale, uamuzi uende ukatolewe, uamuzi dhabiti. Bwana Spika, hawa wote ni mawakili walivyosema. Senator Okongo Omugeni, hata senior counsel yuko pale yule mwingine, vile vile hata kiongozi walio wachache. Ni lipi hili ambalo ni nzito zaidi kwa wao kwenda katika mahakama na kutoa ule ushahidi badala ya kuja hapa Bwana Spika kuongea kukuambia wewe? Nikisoma katika mambo ya seneti na bunge zetu, spika hana macho, spika hana masikio. Wewe umeleta ujumbe ambao umepata kutoka kwa koti Bwana Spika. Hawa ndugu zangu ambao ni mawakili, hata naona wa kutoka Makueni akitingiza akipasa sauti chake Bwana Spika, hawa wanapaswa kwenda mahali ambapo panafaa. Waende katika mahakama, watetee mambo ambayo wanasema katika mahakama. Basi Bwana Spika, huo ujumbe utaletewa wewe kama vile ulivyoletwa hapa, na wewe utausoma. Ikiwa utakuwa unasema ya kwamba vile wanavyotaka kiranja wao aweze kuweko yule anamtaka, Bwana Spika, wewe hauna budi kufanya vile. Lakini kwa sababu sisi katika nchi yetu ya Kenya, ni jambo la kuudhi sana Bwana Spika, ikiwa sisi tutakuwa ni watu ambao tufuati vile amri za mahakama. Bwana Spika, nimeketi katika jumba hili muda wa muhula uliopita Bwana Spika, nikasikia Orengo akiwa ameketi hapa akasema mahakama ndiyo suluhu nikiwa nimetendewa jambo. Bwana Spika, ikiwa wewe utakuwa haufuati vile ambavyo koti zetu zinavyosema, Bwana Spika, sisi hatuna budi. Sheria tunazoketi hapa kuzitengeneza Bwana Spika, sheria zile zinapaswa zipelekwe katika koti zetu ndio wale waanze kufanya uamuzi. Bwana Spika, itakuwa ni jambo la kuvunja moyo sana, ni jambo lisilo na manufaa ikiwa sisi tutakaa hapa tutunge sheria. Baada ya kuzitunga sheria, alafu koti zile ambazo tunataka kupatia mamlaka ya kufanya kazi zake, tunasema sisi hatuzitambui, hatuziheshimu. Bwana Spika, tutakuwa tunafanya jambo lisilo la manufaa, na sisi kama wabunge tunapaswa tuwe tunasema mambo na tunaamini mambo ambayo tunayasema Bwana Spika. Kwa hivyo Bwana Spika, mimi nakusihi kwa kusihi Bwana Spika ya kwamba ikiwa koti imesema ya
kuna ombi limefika hapa kwa dharura, lazima nipeane kwa Senator Asike Kristo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am generally a very sensible, thinking human being. My life has taught me the things that are important and the things really that can fall to the side. Mr. Speaker, I haven't said a word in the last 4 sittings because I have not been given an opportunity to prosecute the things that matter to the constituents that I am here to represent. Persons with disabilities are not getting their voice heard because we have been sat here for days over an issue that the standing orders say is quite a simple matter. Mr. Speaker, you start every single session with a prayer. I take that prayer very, very seriously, as I'm sure the rest of us do, to look at matters in front of us fairly, because the Lord himself has been pleased to put us here to represent Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, how I wish that you would have given the communication as per the standing orders last week as quickly as you have done today on the PPDT. Mr. Speaker, the word divorce has been used severally by the majority side. This seems like an analogy that I've heard and we all have heard many times, which is that there's a divorce dispute. A couple have decided that for whatever reasons they are going to move on, but the neighbor who really wasn't really involved in the matter has unfortunately been thrown into the issue. And now the neighbor is involved in all that is ensuing afterwards, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, it seems to me that it was a very simple matter of communication that has now turned into burning the entire house down. For no...
Senator Asike, you have 1 more minute. Kindly wind up.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What I wish to say that it was a simple communication that has now burnt the house down. We are the upper house, National Assembly the lower house, but it seems like the National Assembly is the lower house with an upper hand because of issues like this that we are prosecuting, which have really no consequence to the normal Kenyan, to the average Kenyan, Mr. Speaker. I beg, Mr. Speaker, that you don't let this issue carry on any further, because there are matters that are of much importance to Kenyans. They don't understand what is going on in this house. Let me be honest. We all know that. And I pray, Mr. Speaker, that you will make the communication, especially as Sifuna has said on deputy, if that has not been put in the PPDT.
So, honorable senators, we have ventilated enough on this matter for almost 1.5 hours. I'll give you 1.5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the only matter which has not been addressed is sub judice. Sub judice, once a matter is already live here, then immediately the courts respect that and they don't interfere with the matter. Once a matter is already live in court, then Senate cannot deal with it. What has happened in this matter, these proceedings were prosecuted yesterday, and it's a matter of public notoriety even to the tribunal that the matters were already live in Senate. So we will deal with this matter in court on 28th. It's a matter of preliminary objection there in court, and I'm sure the suit will be disposed at the same day. I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you, Bagweni, Senator. Actually, that will really relieve this chair from all this agony. If you're in my socks or my shoes, you must know what I'm carrying on my shoulders. I can see today Senator Sifuna is really sympathetic with me. And that I mentioned is my children senator. I think moving forward now you should be my good friend. Yes. So, honorable senators, I think this matter should rest there for today, so that we can make some progress with the other business of the day. But I really want to thank you, and most sincerely, because today we have really exhibited good conduct as senators. The country is happy from both sides. We have argued enough. Both sides have their points, and this is what is going now on debate. This is house for debate, house of debate. Senior, what is it again?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir. Mr. Speaker, sir.
Senator Kadri Muma, are you trying to compete with the elder? That you are complaining, you have given him a minute. The council of the elders will curse you, so just keep quiet. Yes.
Mr. Speaker, sir, I'm sorry. I'm coming at the tail end of the debate. But, Mr. Speaker, you have been very patient with us today, and I commend you for that. Mr. Speaker, what we are discussing here is not legal or even standing orders, because the standing orders are very clear that once the political party has communicated, then the matter goes to the Speaker, and the Speaker just, communicates. That's all. But, Mr. Speaker, the issue we are discussing here is more political than legal or even according to our standing order. Mr. Speaker, the political party, which is the Jubilee, have clearly declared that they are supporting the Kenya Kwanza. And, Mr. Speaker, why should they stick to the side? I mean, here we are not going to be whipped by a Jubilee, but because they have already decided to join the Kenya Kwanza. And the reason is because Kenya Kwanza is poaching our members from this side. Mr. Speaker, if they stop this bad habit of poaching from our side, Mr. Speaker, these issues we are discussing here, forth and back, this is because of interference by the majority side politically. And we are ready to face you politically, but you should not continue to interfere, yes, with our members. You have already poached them, and we have given them to you. So why are you still interfering with us?
At least a comment on Sifuna, because he has not been enjoined.
Thank you. Senator Onyonka, who are you informing? Senator Buru Ondinga?
Yes, sir.
But Dombonde is now on the floor.
No, Mr. Speaker, just give me a minute, sir. It's so important. I've been waiting, sitting here for the last 3 hours.
No. Senator Onyonka, just a minute. I will give you a chance.
Speaker, I know I shouldn't be on the floor when you are there, but gentlemen, relax.
Senator
Take
Onyonka.
it easy. You are in power now. Power is transitory.
Under Senator Onyonka.
Power is transitory. Relax.
Under Senator Onyonka. Honorable Senators, I'm making my second communication. Honorable Senators, in the Speaker's gallery this afternoon, we have 10 teachers from Mundi Awori Primary School in Busia County who are in the Senate on an education tour. I request each member of the group to stand when called out so that they may be acknowledged in the issue of Senate transition. They are one, Nobati Baraza Peri, head teacher; Eunice E. Bwile, deputy head teacher; Tolin F. Awino, teacher; John O. Onditi, a teacher; Bonaventure Luyemba, a teacher; Boniface Wanjara, also a teacher; and the following 3 other teachers: Murekano Ann, Jacqueline Ngira, and then we have Vincent Oyobo on charge of welfare, and last but not the least, Juma A. Jospat, from the Examination Council. Honorable Senators, in our usual tradition of receiving and welcoming visitors to Parliament, I extend a warm welcome to them, and on behalf of the Senate and on my own behalf, wish them a fruitful visit. I thank you. Next order. Who has given you the opportunity now, Senator Minority Leader? How can you just stand up and start speaking, even without the mic? Have your seat and just communicate appropriately.
Mr. Speaker, I'm only saying that
Do you have? I think we concluded that order, Minority Leader. And from last week I said you cannot compel the Speaker to make decisions on the chair. No, today I might lose on you again. No, you know, I've been so lenient the afternoon, and now you are taking me back again to the same thing we have concluded. Honorable Minority Leader. So who is the one of the court order? And he not to have the court order. The same court can clear him. You argue those issues in court. So who is making that judgment? That is the issues you should do on Monday, the 28th. The court order is very clear. And I'm happy Senator Manzo is very well equipped with this information. He said there are things you do during the mention on Monday. Next order.
Order number 3, messages.
Order.
Order number 4, petitions.
Next order.
Order number 5, papers.
Chairperson, Standing Committee on Education. You have their papers today?
Mr. Speaker.
Consult the chair, kindly consult.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, sir, I beg to lay the following paper on the table of the Senate today, the 21st of February, 2023. Mr. Speaker, this is the report of the Standing Committee on Education on its consideration of the County Vocational Educational and Training Bill 2022, Senate Bill number 3 of 2022. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
What is it, Senator Sifuna?
Mr. Speaker, we do appreciate that the chair has been very patient and allowed people to debate. The question we're asking ourselves is, what was the point of all those submissions? Because there is only one question we wanted your guidance on. The matters not covered by this court case, when will that communication be made? Please, Senator, allow me to address a question to the Speaker.
I'm able to multitask. Proceed.
Mr. Speaker, we just want guidance on when the communication that is not covered by the court order will be made. Oh, that is all. Then the rest of the matters before the court, we will go to the courts. We have no problem.
Proceed.
Should I proceed, Mr. Speaker? I'm saying the only question we're asking ourselves is, when will the pronouncement or the communication be made over the position that is not covered by the court case? Because as we have said, Mr. Speaker, and the court order is before you, the case is specific to the question of the seat of the whip. It does not cover the seat of the deputy whip. Mr. Speaker, when can we have that communication? That's all we're asking.
You know, Senator Nairobi Senator Sifuna, you know the issue of when is what has caused us all this problem. If there is anything that has been not covered, that has not been covered by the court order, then that matter I will look into the court order and then I will communicate. But now the when and how, you leave that to the office, to my office to communicate. And also, you know, I don't work in isolation. We work with a team of experts who run the house. So we will be able to go through the court order and advice. Thank you. Mr. Senator Ososi. I thought you should be now crafting some communication because you are an expert in this matter.
Mr. Speaker, I have had the benefit to look at the detailed orders issued by the court. And since in your communication, you have somehow alluded to that court order being part of the documents that are guiding your decision this afternoon. But one important issue is that the detailed order seems to suggest that this House reviews the decision it has made in regards to the Senate Business Committee. Now, I don't know how that will be done because we already made a decision. We now have a proper Senate Business Committee constituted. So by admitting that order to this House, what is the way forward, Mr. Speaker? Because, and that's why Senator Omugeni was requesting that that order be tabled before the House. We discuss it because there are some fundamental issues in that order which are going to affect this House fundamentally, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Haji.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've listened to the proceedings and the submissions by the members, and I would not want to correct my elder who has spoken here before me and stated that Jubilee has been poached and has moved to the Kenya Kwanza side. I want to make it very clear. As a ranking member of Jubilee, we have not left the Azimio coalition. And also, it is very imperative and important that we make it very clear as Jubilee members that we are founding members of Coalition Azimio. And we have invested heavily in Azimio coalition. And if anybody on our side has a problem with Jubilee, it is not for us to leave Azimio. And there is no way they can remove us from Azimio. The bone of contention, Mr. Speaker, sir, between us and our colleagues is an ideological difference that we have. We've heard here very clearly from the distinguished senator of Homa Bay when he said that they believe that the president and the Kenya Kwanza government is a legitimate government, but in their eyes, they are illegitimate. Whereas in Jubilee, we're arguing that the Kenya Kwanza government and the President of the Republic of Kenya are legitimate through and through. That is the difference. And Mr. Speaker, sir, for the minority leader to stand here and mislead the House, that the dispute is between, the minority side is between Fatuma Dulo, Senator of Isiolo, and the minority side is misleading the House. First, they came for our Public Service Commission seat. Then they came for Senator Kamar, Professor Kamar, in the House Business Committee. Now they are coming for Senator Dulo. Who is next? So should we just sit? Exactly. Should we just sit aside and watch them cannibalize the members of Jubilee one by one? And they come to this House and say that the Speaker cannot referee between the political parties, which is fair. If the Speaker cannot do it, the courts can do it. And that's why Senator Dulo and Jubilee went to court, to stop this injustice which is going on here.
we have not left Azimio. We have a difference. And I stood here last week and said that we should sit down as members of the coalition and iron out our differences. But the members here do not want to do that. So what choice are we left with? They cannot have their cake and eat it too. Yes. Mr. Speaker, and that's why we will stand with Senator Fatuma Dulo. They took our house. We will stand, the two of us. It doesn't matter. We will stand and we will fight our case. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Senator Chelege, let's hear from this side.
You are next.
Mr. Speaker, I rise under Standing Order 190 on the Senate Business Committee and its role, Mr. Speaker, and also on the presiding of the House of the Speaker, that is Standing Order number 18 and 19, and also Standing Order number 17 on the conduct of a business, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the issue, you have given a ruling that you shall communicate. It is only fair that if there is any decision, and I'm surprised because my friends here, including Senator Otsozi, are alleging that they have not seen a court order, including Senate Minority Leader. Yet Senator Sifuna, Mr. Speaker, if you are keen, he was waiving a court order. So, and you used it when you are presenting yourself, through you, Mr. Speaker, just protect me so that I prosecute my point, is that this intellectual dishonesty is unfair, Mr. Speaker. Because you have given a ruling, why are they challenging your authority, yet they want your authority to use to prosecute the agenda, Mr. Speaker. And therefore, Mr. Speaker, it is out of order. If there is any issue, Mr. Speaker, you don't sit alone in Senate Business Committee. The membership of Senate Business Committee includes the Speaker as the chairperson, the Senate Majority Leader, the Senate Minority Leader, the Senate Majority Whip, and the Senate Minority Whip. So if there is any issue that it needs to be tabled or to be prosecuted through the normal procedures, Mr. Speaker, it should be through the Senate Business Committee where you preside over, Mr. Speaker. They should not make the country believe as if the decisions you make in this House, or even now you carry order of business in this House, is because as Senator Katuri Murungi, not as the House of the Speaker, which is Senate Business Committee, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say, to go on record, Mr. Speaker, that even Senator Oburu Odinga has alleged that we are poaching. I don't know whether that is parliamentary or not. But the point is that, Mr. Speaker, as Kenya Kwanza and as a ruling coalition, Mr. Speaker, we need to be honest with this country. Because if we are not respecting the rule of law, Mr. Speaker, then why are we here, Mr. Speaker? And therefore, even Senator Haji, Mr. Speaker, Senator Haji and Senator Oburu Odinga, Mr. Speaker, Kenya coalition, Mr. Speaker, as a ruling coalition, everybody is welcome. Even if today ODM wants to join government and defect to government, there is no problem. Because that is the essence of political parties' democracy, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm still on point of order, Mr. Speaker. I don't know why Senator Ledama is getting agitated, and I was listening to him, Mr. Speaker. In conclusion, Mr. Speaker, let no one intimidate you, challenge your authority. You are the authority and absolute authority, Mr. Speaker. If you have made a ruling that we proceed with Senate Business Committee, so be it. Anybody who misbehaves and rule, Mr. Speaker, Standing Order 123, 121, they should be thrown out, the way I was done.
Honorable Senators, I think this issue is well placed where it should be. Yeah? I want to give Senator Onyonka 1 minute and we conclude this matter.
Mr. Speaker, thank you so much. I really beg you, sir, that I'm beginning to be very discouraged being in this House because I hardly get an opportunity to speak when I have to. And my seniority should give me precedent. Thank you. Mr. Speaker, under the Powers and Privileges Act, if you sit and look at what that act talks about, you as the Speaker of this House has no business discussing or deliberating the issues which are taking place between Jubilee and the Azimio coalition. Mr. Speaker, I really want to congratulate my brother Mungatana. You've been in this house for a very long time. What you have said today has made me have extreme amount of respect for you. Let us not sacrifice this house on the expediency of the political wars that are taking place in this country. Let us protect this house because, Mr. Speaker, this house is protected for me to come and discuss anything, particularly issues of national interest. And I may not be able to speak them out there because somebody may sue me and say that I have actually destroyed the name and made allegations against them which are not true and they're all false. But this house, the privilege and the protection that I have in this house allows me to discuss anybody and anything so long as it's within the law. That is the standing orders and the Constitution. Mr. Speaker, I want to beg with you, be greater than many of us, be greater than even yourself. Make a ruling that protects the Senate. Allow the two parties to go and fight out there, but allow this house to be independent and for the house to do what it is legitimately meant to do.
I gave
Thank you,
guidance
Mr. Speaker.
to the way forward. I did that. And I want us to make progress. Kindly, next order. Next order. Next order.
Order number 6, notices of motion.
Senator Waume Wamatinga. Proceed.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, sir. I arise to give. Yes. I think, Mr. Speaker, sir,
You know, Senator,
I think the taxpayers sent us here to talk about these things.
I've given a lot of time to air your issues.
It is.
And I gave guidance on way forward, what we need to do. We cannot live on one standing order from 2 p.m. There is nothing new even you are quoting. There is nothing new. Quote. Just a minute, Senator Wamatinga. Which is standing order? Standing order number 2. Yes, proceed on what?
Mr. Speaker, I rise on standing order number 2 on interpretation of the standing orders. Mr. Speaker, let us not act as if we just dropped out of school yesterday. We are guided by this standing order, Mr. Speaker. These standing orders, Mr. Speaker, define what a whip is, Mr. Speaker. And what you are being invited to, Mr. Speaker, is by the chair violating these standing orders. Standing order on interpretation says a party whip means a senator designated by a parliamentary party as the party whip for the purpose of transaction of business in the Senate and includes the majority whip and minority party. In the interpretation, it further defines a parliamentary party, and I will read it, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a parliamentary party, and I'm happy to read it here on interpretation, means a party or coalition of parties consisting of not less than 10 senators. Mr. Speaker, seriously, if we cannot respect our standing orders, if we cannot respect our standing orders, what exactly are we doing? What example are we showing to future leaders?
So what is out of order now?
Mr. Speaker, I do not want to say the chair is completely out of order, but I just want to say that by violating this standing order.
Who has violated the standing order?
Mr. Speaker, the chair, unfortunately, with all due respect, is violating the standing order.
You are out of order, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I have indicated clearly
next
that
order.
He is violating the standing order.
Next order.
Mr. Speaker,
next order.
With all due respect.
Oh, Amatinga, proceed.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Senator
Mr. Speaker, sir,
proceed.
I arise to give notice of a motion enhancing highway safety and conveniency that I and Senator Mohammed Faki together felt that we should Mr. Speaker, sir, let me say that this Friday I'll be laying to rest one of my nephews who I lost through a road accident at the age of 21, and therefore feel that this is very, very important to us. That aware that 67% of the road crash fatalities and injuries in the country comprise of economically and productive age groups between 15 and 64 years, and that the importance of good post-crash care reduces death and disability, and the suffering of the road crash survivors creates the urgent need for an effective emergency medical care system and elements and process on our highways. Mr. Speaker, sir, further aware that lives and properties are lost or irreparably damaged daily on the major highways in the country due to the accidents and the explosion of fuel tankers, and the lack of accessible road and side amenities such as medical clinics, rescue centers, fire engines, and ambulances hamper efforts to mitigate the carnage caused by accidents, rescue lives, and put out fires. Cognizant that setting up safe stopping points for the road users at regular intervals with the necessary roadside amenities such as fuel stations, parking space, restaurants, telephone booth, minor repair shops, medical facilities, and toilet enhances total travel experience, and lack of these points make it impractical for drivers to stop as often as they would wish, resorting to driving-related fatigue, a significant contributor to the accidents on the highways. Further cognizant that provision of the amenities such as ambulances, fire trucks, and satellite medical clinics to provide emergency services to the road accident victims would save lives lost daily on the major roads. Acknowledging that the governments across the world, such as France and Germany, have taken the task of setting up such amenities through incorporation of the basic provision in their road and transport structure through different models of public-private partnership, risk or ownership. Now, therefore, the Senate resolves that the Kenya National Highway Authority, in collaboration with the Council of Governors, to come up with a policy framework on the incorporation of road reserves for roadside amenities in all highway designs. The Ministry of Health, Roads, Transport and Public Works, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to undertake a survey to ascertain the specific amenities required but not available on the existing highways, such that satellite medical clinics, fire trucks and ambulances, and identify the most convenient location to develop them. And the Ministry of Roads and Transport, in conjunction with the Council of Governors, to develop public-private partnership guideline on leasing of the road reserves to developers, financing and construction of the amenities, and the packaging of the incentives to attract investors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Thank you. Next order.
Order number 7, statements.